Environmental globalization refers to the internationally coordinated practices and regulations regarding environmental protection. An example of environmental globalization would be the series of international tropical timber agreement treaties, establishing international tropical timber organization and promoting sustainable management of tropical forests. Environmental globalization is usually supported by non-governmental organizations and governments of developed countries, but opposed by governments of developing countries which see pro-environmental initiatives as hindering their economic development. Definitions and characteristics. Carl S. Zimmer defined it as the increased role of globally organized management institutions, knowledge systems and monitoring, and coordinated strategies aimed at resource, energy, and conservation issues. Alan Granger in turn wrote that it can be understood as an increasing spatial uniformity and contentedness in regular environmental management practices. Stephen Yardley has referred to this concept as globalization of environmental concern. Grange also cited a study by Clark, which he noted was an early treatment of the concept, and distinguished three aspects of environmental globalization: global flows of energy, materials and organisms, formulation and global acceptance of ideas about global environment, and environmental governance. Environmental globalization is related to economic globalization, as economic development on a global scale has environmental impacts on such scale, which is of concern to numerous organizations and individuals. While economic globalization has environmental impacts, those impacts should not be confused with the concept of environmental globalization. In some regards, environmental globalization is in direct opposition to economic globalization, particularly when the latter is described as encouraging trade, and the former as promoting pro-environment initiatives that are an impediment to trade. For that reason, environmental activists might be opposed to economic globalization, but advocate environmental globalization. History. Granger has discussed that environmental globalization in the context of international agreements on pro-environmental initiatives, according to him, precursors to modern environmental globalization can be found in the colonial-era scientific forestry. Modern initiatives contributing to environmental globalization include the 1972 United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, came from the World Bank 1980s requirements that development projects need to protect indigenous peoples and conserve biodiversity. Other examples of such initiative include treaties such as the series of international tropical timber agreement treaties. Therefore, unlike other main forms of globalization, economic, political and cultural, which were already strong in the 19th century, environmental globalization is a more recent phenomenon, one that began in earnest only in the later half of the 20th century. Similarly, Stephen Yardley states that it was around that time that the environmental movement started to organize on the international scale, focus on the global dimension of the issues. Supporters and opponents. According to Granger, environmental globalization is usually supported by various non-governmental organizations and governments of developed countries, and opposed by governments of developing countries, which see pro-environmental initiatives as hindering their economic development. Governmental resistance to environmental globalization takes form of policy ambiguity and collective resistance in forums such as United Nations 2, projects that would introduce stronger regulations and new institutions policing environmental issues worldwide. World Trade Organization has also been criticized as focused on economic globalization over concerns of environmental protection, which are seen as impeding the trade. Stephen Yardley states the WTO should not be described as anti-environmental, but its decisions have major impact on environment worldwide, and they are based primarily on economic concerns, with environmental concerns being given secondary weight.